Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the Therapeutic Thursdays. And this is a conversation we are having with Akshita, who is also a dance movement therapy facilitator. She works with corporate employees, and we will let her introduce and talk about her journey of why she pursued dance movement therapy, how it was, and what it is looking like right now for her. Akshita, over to you.
Hi, guys. Thank you for inviting me, first of all. It's been quite space and time continuum for me because this is the ninth episode, and ninth is my birth number,
Ah.
fortunately. So I'm taking this as a universal sign that I have to continue the journey into movement therapy. Um, I have started this journey actually 3 years back, not just last year, but I got into movement and movement science in 2022. And I spent 10 years studying psychology with it. I spent 10 years studying Freudian school of thought, Jungian school of thought, Adler school of thought, whatever material I could get with whatever research papers on Laban I could get, I started studying to a point where it became that I have to come to Simtai. I have to count it in and to at least explore for myself that how the space looks like. But little did I know that it will completely change the way I look at it in general. So then post that entire groundwork of 1.5 years, which I was doing parallelly with my job, I entered the course with you guys, and from there the journey actually kicked off. And in between the things, it kind of became, yes, too much also, but it was too relaxing as well because there's a space in between where you can find and say that, you know what, it's just one part, my job, and then the other part, which is actually my life, gets integrated into it. And when the course completed, I had to actually do the training hours of it on the field. The first thing I did was I did it with my team. I kept to a point where I knew the people I was working with for now 3 to 4 years. And I was working with Mercedes Benz at that time. And it started from there that I conducted 1 hour session with them, just plain and simple fun games of movement and intellectual things, and something with relative to what the team also wanted to identify how we can change the processes of the entire situation. So I kind of did a session where it was technical but fairly movement based technical. So I was posing a lot of technical questions to the team, but they had to respond through movement. They didn't have to actually speak the words. And it actually helped my manager to understand what kind of people he wants to employ for a certain amount of task and what kind of other people he can utilize in a different section of the task. And it kind of brought the entire team together. And I saw what it did for 1 hour and how people who didn't even wanted to interact were in the space just dancing their moment off. From there, I think my journey started into completely corporate sector where I had to come to a point where approaching startups for certain, let's say, certain movement sessions, it had to be like pitched. There was a complete pitching environment for me. I had to create a pitch. I had to pitch them what it is, how it looks like, what's the structure of the session. I did all of that in 2024. Then from there, I went to a course in France, which allowed me to understand the movement even more deeper. So, one of the good things which I understood is that our senses, whether you're in a corporate sector or whether you're non-corporate or a creative sector, our senses are the first things which gets you in check. And to integrate that, I learned in my course in France, to integrate that, you have to go back to the basics of how child develops the senses. What's the first sense they develop? And from there, it follows the sounds, it follows the smell, it follows everything. That changes inherently the movement we also have while working. And that's the space nobody touched, at least so far. That's the space where a person sitting on a laptop, clicking the mouse, they don't realize how childlike that movement itself is sometimes. And I think for me, getting that integration together in any corporate environment is the biggest, let's say, a challenge, and it's a blessing also. Because once you open that Pandora's box and get your session in place, people understand. People know how basic human movements are, how fundamental it is that you sit for 8 hours in the corporate sector and you don't realize the movements itself are inhibited in a way that it has to be childlike. I fortunately understand that, and I'm able to integrate it through whatever I've learned so far. Um, Plus, I keep visiting a lot of physiotherapists. So, one of the finest interactions I had with one of the greatest physiotherapists in Bangalore was how neurologically your movements will interpret when you're sitting or when you're standing or when you're actually working. And he kind of mentioned this statement that no two movements have to be repeated. As a human, in the human anatomy, he was coming from a neurological point of view that our human bodies are not made in a way to keep repeating those movements. That's going to give a definite stop on your range of motion for each part of your body.
Mm.
That's such a fundamental thing for corporate. It is such a fundamental basic fact that we keep sitting, and we don't move. And when we are moving, let's say, just this part of the hand for the mouse. And half of the people have carpal tunnel in this particular region. Why? Because it's a repeated movement. We are not supposed to do that. And I kind of pick these conversations up, tie it into my session, and then put it into the pitch and then go from there. So this keeps evolving. I've understood one thing, that in 3 years of being into the movement space and understanding what movement feels like, this keeps evolving. You get different genres, you get different people, you get from manager level I've done till a graduate level of an engineer who's just joined the company. I've interacted with them all, and it's the most fundamental joining force for everybody. And that makes it very exciting. The pitching makes it very exciting. I
This is
kind
a
of,
very good point. But how do you, I mean, the pitch I'm sure is exciting, but generally, from my experience, even after the pitch gets sanctioned, the people who come are never truly, really excited. There is always, from what I've observed, a very big inhibition,
mm,
reluctance, because a lot of times employees have been forced by their managers or HRs to do this. So for me, the most important and most tough part is to sell myself to them,
yeah, yeah.
because they're just not, they're quite, they can be quite hostile as well. But then, like you said, that once they move, it is so different.
Mhm.
Firstly, like for me, I've noticed just them moving the way they want in an environment which tells them to not do what they want is also in itself so precious for them. But it takes time for them to realize and acknowledge. Do you think this has been like a problem for you as well?
I mean, yes and no. So there are two parts. For a corporate employee, you have to approach the technical part of it. You have to intellectualize a little bit to tell them the actual outcome of the session. And what I've also done is I've also prepared some worksheets where they could guess or they could come out of the session saying that, this was the starting of the session and this is the end of my session. So the first part would be yes, it becomes a little hesitant because they want the outcome to be very tangible. So you have to literally intellectualize and tell them from a point of, uh, let's say, a theory, saying that this is the theory of it, and this is the application, which is this is the output that I'm presenting. And no, also because with the 8 hours or 9 hours of workspace that they have, a lot of people also want that workspace out. They want that break. Even if they're inhibited to move, just by the sheer space of having to have an interaction with somebody, or to have a space where they can even go and talk to the people they talk in regular basis and not think about work. So in that way, it becomes not so difficult. But there are few certain circumstances where I had to like literally tell them that, you know what, it's a free flow session. Just go about it for 5 minutes and then I structurize it. You need to give them the space to open themselves up when I am not in the room. I go out, I just play the music and I go out, and they're like all over the space. They're like dancing, they're moving the way they want, or they're even sitting and standing. It's up to them. It's just that they have to come to the safe space. And another factor, which most of the time, is that they have to trust. How do you approach that trust? It depends from company to company, the person I'm talking to, the HR I'm talking to. If it's Mercedes Benz, it's a different activity for me. But if it's a startup, it's almost a different activity for me. And I understood that you have to find that common ground with the people you're talking. For example, I had a pitch session with a startup where I ended up talking about her kid more than my own session, because I knew that I have to approach the HR in a way that she understands what I'm bringing on the table. And that made it a lot interesting. That made my entire pitch a lot more interesting. But I've had also conversation with the people who work in the university or their college professors where they want to intellectualize the entire activity. And I'm like, okay, let's do that. I can do that. I can present that. I have the data. I have the research with me. So yes and no. There are always going to be that. But the bottom line for me is that you have to ensure that there's trust in the conversation, and the conversation has to be a very one-on-one, interpersonal. At least for the corporate employees, it has to be like that. Otherwise, you don't touch what you want to touch in that pitch. So you have
Great,
to tell it.
Akshita. I know it's like Akshita giving a talk to dance movement therapists who would like to work with corporate
Yeah,
sector in the future. Please get in touch with Akshita. She is going to help you create
yep,
your pitches and approach HRs.
yep.
I'm a See, it's a very collaborative space. Even you understand that there's no wrong or a right answer to it.
Right?
It's just answers that you're searching. They're just plain and simple answers, and there are no stupid questions in the field because everything in our human body is interconnected. How do you detach that? Even let's say, what you do, Deepti, or what you do, Purva, you take dance lessons, you do something prenatal and postnatal. It's completely interconnected,
Right?
extremely interconnected, to the point where prenatal, if you talk about, the first senses that gets developed for a child is their nose and their eyes. That's the first sense that gets the bone gets started through the umbilical cord. That's the first one. So they're able to smell the sense, and from there the psychological safety factor for a child starts. Lesser people, even in the corporate sector, know that we talk a lot about psychological safety for everybody in the work environment, but it's a factor that has to be considered for every individual from their childhood till now. No matter how many sensing hats you put across the environment, if the person from their birth didn't feel psychological safe, it's going to be a little difficult.
Right.
And that is the aspect which I want to sometimes touch as well. That you know what, become childlike. You've almost 40, you're about to experience another phase where your kids will become your parents. That is a cycle that is psychologically bound to happen. So think about it in a manner that even if you're at 40 and you're consistently changing and becoming childlike internally in your persona, how do your movements change? They should be more freeing, they should not be more resting or inhibited. I have to touch those points. I feel like those are the important points which A, they don't know, so they are really not aware. And for me, my sessions in the corporate sector have to be a little bit intellectualized because they need to know this information. They need to be made aware of this information, as I feel. Rest of the creative sector is easier, I would say, because they already know a lot of stuff.
Right.
If arts and other modalities in place, but corporate has no modality. It's just one working screen and I'm there. So it
So,
is like that.
all right. So when people actually go through these sessions, Akshita, let's come to step two. Pitch is done, HR is convinced, group is ready. When you work with them, what are the changes that you have seen? Is there an improved efficiency, or at a human level, do they feel good about themselves at the end of
Yeah.
the session, ultimately, right?
There. So again, awareness for each individual is their own perspective, what I understand, and I have to keep that open. My idea of these sessions are to bring awareness to the table. It could be good awareness, it could be bad awareness, it could be awareness of something that is triggered in them, and they generally get an idea. So, like for example, what I said earlier also, that I prepare a sheet. Imagine I've done a session where I have asked them, I've just put a circle on the sheet and I've asked them to create a pie chart with the percentage to actually ask them how does their entire life at the moment looks like. What percentage is family, what percentage is, and what percentage is empty. Now there are a batch of 10 people, out of which 9 people have 100% cut out to each and every sector of their life, something or the other things gone going. There was one person who kept one slot free, let's say 5%. And I just asked that person, why did you do that? She was a manager. She has been a manager for quite some time. And she was like, this 5% is something that has not come up, but is an open possibility for me. And then I asked her to represent that open possibility in a movement. And she did that. There are sessions like these where one person changed the perspective of the 9 people who had their entire pie charts full. And that brought a lot of awareness on the table that, you know what, not everything has to be filled, something has to flow. Even if it's just one movement, one cycle,
Mm.
one action, something has to flow. And where is the space to flow? Correct? There's no space to flow if it's 100% full. So, awareness in that way, it's a good awareness to have. It could also trigger somebody that something is comparably less in their sector to something comparably more. That's a trigger in that case. And that has also happened. And then there's a movement of self judgment and self worth have to be aligned together and then has to come up. So there are sessions where I do a blindfold and I'm like, okay, there's nothing, nobody's around you. Just keep your eyes closed and then stand still and move. There's nobody watching you. Where's the judgment? There's no judgment there. There's no potentially any eye on you. Move, just move, and then come back and fill that space again, fill that pie chart again, and see what changes. There are changes like that. So becomes very individualistic. I would say the awareness factor of it, good or
Hmm.
bad, it has to be kept individualistic because it's movement. If I understand, if we are very true to ourselves, it can move, it can mean something very different for somebody, but it will mean something very different for me as an individual. So you have to keep that space an individual entity. You have to respect that entity so that the safety of that entity is ensured.
So, Akshata, from the instances that you have given or the activities that you have mentioned, it feels like these are activities that a facilitator can facilitate in about the fourth or the fifth session, but maybe not before that for a typical group, especially I feel a corporate group. And
Hmm.
again, because they seem very daunting and intimidating, it would not go well if in the first session, you'd be like, okay, now I'm going to blindfold you and you have to tell me all about your deep dark secrets. But so what do you generally do as a part of the therapy in that to somewhere ensure that towards the end of every session, they're not going back worse off than they came. Some
Yeah,
therapy in that sense that their stress levels are slightly reduced, or maybe their mind is not completely on work, they're not
yeah,
as fixated yet. They can feel like you were saying a little bit more they can start living a little more, a bit more within themselves. Thoda, there is slightly more grounded feeling. What are the things that you do maybe for every session that would
hmm.
help them feel like, in layman's term, better than they did before?
Yeah. So the structure of the session is you have to start with a ritual and then close it with the ritual, right? It is very important to set the ritual right in the first session.
Yes.
For the corporate employees, it's like breaking them out of their habit. So one of the things that I do, or one of the things I've done in the past, I would say, I ask them to get their phones out in a circle. Keep it in a circle outside. Okay? And they just have to stand there watching that something's going on in their phones altogether, and they don't have to move, they don't have to say anything, they just have to breathe and stand and let it be. For at least 5 minutes they have to do that. And if somebody's phone rings, they're not picking up, nothing is happening there. That 5 minute of settlement where they can leave everything aside, they can leave. If they want to close their eyes, they're free to close their eyes. If they want to, like, don't, if they don't want to face anybody, they can do that in those 5 minutes. I've done that particular activity for 3 or 4 groups in the corporate sector, and it has come to a point where in next half an hour, they're like, they understand the sense of not having the phone for 5 minutes, which is very important. And I make sure, as a part of my ground rule, that they're not getting any laptops in, they're not getting any pens and pencils in, they're not getting anything in that session. Even if they want to leave their phones, they're allowed to leave their phones. They have to come barehanded, basically. No Apple Watches, nothing. We come barehanded, otherwise it will not work.
I feel
Any
a very important ground rule in a corporate.
exactly.
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah, yeah, it
Very
is.
important.
And it works because I get the music in, I get the colors in, I get the pencil in. The first 5 minutes when they're done, right? I've also asked them in some sessions, I place box of color pencils around, and I've asked them to pick one color and keep it with them. I've done that. And the thing is, why I do that is to understand the color theory of where their mind is. Sometimes that helps. Presumably, sometimes person who's picking up violet will at the end of the session pick up yellow, which is a
Shift.
bigger change internally. If you talk about just the chakras and understanding the color theory of the chakras, it inherently shows in the movements. It inherently shows up in our selections. That is how human beings are. So when they pick up the color and then they're seeing different colors around, they're picking up their own and they sit in the circle, start introductions and then a little bit of inherent movements that they have to start off with, even if they're just flowing like this. Post the session, I repeat the same activity where they have to pick up this color again, another color perhaps, or maybe the same color. Then they see the difference. And I reflectively ask them, why did you choose the color you chose before, and why did you choose the color you choose now? What's the significance for you? I'm not going to answer what is it for me, but what is the significant changes for you? The answers are again coming from a point of awareness. So what I understand is it will only happen if the ground rules of the thing when you start the activity are laid out best. And they're a little strict, I would say, because and the fun thing is the corporate people, they're already aware of the guidelines. They're already adhering to it. It's just a different guideline. That's about it. So it's not that difficult for the group to come without it. But yes, 5 minutes of silence without their phones actually changes how they start the activity. And then half of the time they are actually engaged in the activity because they're coming from a point of presence as a human being. Corporate people tend to live in future, even me. I am not apart from the group or the cultural right now. We live in future. We plan and plan and plan without realizing that life actually ebbs and flows. Whatever plans you are adopting over and over and over again. It's just that bringing them to the gestalt point of understanding, you know what? Be here. Just be here for 5 minutes without your phone and see how it feels like. That is the one point where the starting happens in the session, and from there it just flows. I've
Actually,
been
Akshita,
for
go on,
yeah.
go on, go on, go on.
So I've been fortunate to get groups where it becomes easier because they already know that they have to follow certain guidelines. That is also one part I've been lucky. But more or less, corporate people have certain processes that they adhere to in daily life, so it's not that difficult sometimes. It is easier, more than you realize.
So when you're talking about your ground rules, I just realized that the ground rule itself is therapeutic to answer Purva's question, right? Leave your devices away becomes therapy, and that's it. And then you move on and bringing them to the present. You do all of that. But just that act of keeping away from the ticking time and the responsibilities and reminders and targets, you just keep that away, and there goes your entire session. That's it. End of therapy in a way, right?
In a way, yes, these things, because you have to understand these are people who work every single minute since they
Yes,
enter the space of the office. You keep them engaged by giving them something to work upon. Whether it's internal, whether it's external, you have to make sure that they're doing something. Then these are the people who find themselves a little hesitant to sit idle, which is like being present.
correct.
But there's a need to engage into that also.
Mhm.
There, there are tricks to get them to the place point and say, ki, huh, now pause. Like, for example, a very simple activity, move and pause. It's the simplest of it, but imagine the engagement there. They feel like it's an activity, but really what they're doing is just you're coming back to the present and just being. They're not really
Mm.
doing anything per se, but they're also doing something internally. So you have to catch hold of these people to tell them, you know what, it's not your free time. You're not doing free time. It's something you're working upon, but what it is have to be told. So it has to be a lot of engagement there. You have to keep them telling them, keeping that, you know, this is the work we are going to do. Every activity has to have what it is for them that has to come out, or what it is for them that has to be an outcome as on an individual level, not as a whole on the group, but on an individual level. You have to explain every activity like that. Just give them the target that, you know what, it could, interpretation could be very different. It could look like anything, but let's make it look like something, or which makes sense to you. It doesn't have to make sense to anybody else in the group, but
Mm.
get something out for yourself. And when you do it that way, probably their half an hour, 1 hour, where it is gone, even they don't know.
Actually, in
I
our
feel one, yeah,
go on. So, in facilitators' term, remember we would discuss this often. Meet your clients where they are, and from there, you lead them to where you need them to go. So, exactly that, I think, Akshita, you're giving a class for a facilitator here. Meet them.
yeah,
They need targets, but you set their targets.
Yeah. You see, I have been I've pretty much experienced movement therapy sessions with Sintai in a manner that I'm not becoming a facilitator per se, I'm becoming a medium for them. And every therapist is a medium.
Mm.
They're the mediums which transcends you into yourself, then actually getting anything else done. They're like, I would say they're like more or less shamans or gurus or guides, which again they're all mediums. You ebb and flow in your space, understanding how they're pulling you into the section and then they're letting you be. So all the
yeah,
facilities out there in the world, not just us three, all
Yes.
the facilitators are mediums. You have to understand that. And when you become a medium, you have to be free like water. There's no other way because you have to flexibly change into where the person is, change the shape, change the size, change the volume. And then when the person changes, you have to shift yourself into that category as well. So the transference of it is little less, I would say, because you're already flowing into the space with them.
yeah. I also feel always that the term facilitator is quite apt because lot of times people feel that the therapist will validate your emotions, will tell you whether or not you were right, will tell you how to speak the next time there is a conflict, for example. But I always tell this to everyone that facilitator and facilitation is precisely what I'm doing. I'm facilitating a process inside of you. I'm not telling you, you are telling yourself. I'm just using the right words. I'm using the right music, sometimes telling you how to move, but it's all happening. I'm not guiding your movement. I'm not dictating what you should be feeling or not. So, yeah, like you said, that it is, we are a medium. And even the things that I feel you said for corporates, lot of things apply for a general clientele also.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
And
yep, I feel again, this is the term good place to stop. I feel is that it doesn't make sense because our conversations also ebb and flow, right? There is
yeah,
never a good point to stop, but we must, unfortunately.
okay. I mean that's again a movement, right?
Yes. Movement with some boundaries to it right now.
Hmm.
So we have this ritual, Akshita, since we started with that, a ritual to summarize our experience of this little talk into a gesture or a movement. So what would that be like for both of you? Let's start with Akshita and then let's ask Purva.
I would just say this.
Oh.
Nice to see that on you, Akshita. I have rarely seen you with
Hmm.
that. As long as I have known you, I've never seen you do this. And that's the first time. So that's just amazing.
Yeah, it's just this because I I would say the space has grown for me in terms of being an
Hmm.
individual. The time when I met you guys, it was a very different time. And since then, everything in life has been very movie, I would say very movement based. So you settle into it. You understand the
So
change and you
beautiful.
settle into it. So this becomes that.
That's sweet. She's flowing, right, Purva? Like
Hmm.
Akshita
Yeah.
is in that groove.
Yeah, even I could notice like she was like that when she was talking as well. So even now, because I think I might be mirroring her movement and waviness. So very unimaginatively, I feel like doing this as my movement.
Yeah.
What about you, Deepti?
For me, I think every time, not just this, but every conversation with Akshita has been like empowering. It's full of power.
Mm,
It's full of
mm,
punches that come, and it's so inspiring. And now, also, it was like that. It was so much for a therapist, and a lot of lessons, lot of nitbits to pick from this conversation that we had with Akshita. So it has been very empowering. I believe it's going to be for everybody else who watches this also. And I
Yeah.
hope many people end up doing dance movement therapy sessions with the corporate sector because, as Akshita said,
mm.
movement is one thing that is truly missing in their life because intellectually a lot of things happen, but if it is not done with the right movements or creative movements, I think we are really restricting our own creative
Yeah.
flows. So
I, I feel like I'm at a stage point where I've been 10 years into corporate, and at this point, I mean, I'm actually contemplating to do MA in psychology just for the fact that I have been into this complete movement therapy circle so much in last 6 months. People, therapists who have been in therapy for years and years have come back and you know what, we want a person like you joining this space because for me, what I understand for myself is I am higher on the intellectual band of emotions. I understand the disparity of it
right.
completely, like literally very clearly what each emotion means. And I sit through my own therapy sessions and I get that feedback back. That I don't, my therapist is like, I don't have to work with you. You just need a nudge and it's all there, man. You're flowing in the session. So with corporate, yes, it's quite a restricted platform, even for me at point, because the awareness of it ticks every single time. But I hope that continues. I hope I'm taking more and more corporate clients throughout whenever is possible. But I might shift also. It's all
More
Movement is
power to
all
you,
about that.
Akshita.
it's
But
all
really, more power to you, and it very excited to see what you do in future. Thank you so much for joining us today, taking the time out on a weekend, no less, to
yeah.
record. Thank you so much, and hope to see you again soon for something
Yes,
else.
more conversations probably over a cup of coffee, and
Oh, yep,
Akshita and
yep.
us go well together in a cafe.
We do, we do.
So,
All
thank you
right.
so much, Akshita.
Thank you so much. Ciao.
Guys, this fun. All right. Bye.
Bye. Take
Bye
care.
bye. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.